If the government shuts down, it will be average Americans who suffer most.
Yeah, that was Chuck Schumer, not this year, but previously, talking about the dangers of a government shutdown. Now he seems like he's willing to do it. Funny how times change. Anyways, this is welcome to another edition of Spark the Conversation. This is your host, Mark the Spark, bringing you today's news. Today we're going to talk about some Ukraine stuff. Pete Buttigieg is interested in running for president. The continuing resolution spending bill that is hanging in the Senate right now, tariffs, and more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with a friend, leave a comment below. Here we go. So there's a continuing resolution that has passed the House so far, is sitting in the Senate right now, looking for 60 votes, or just for the Democratic Party that has, the minority in the Senate to not filibuster it. So basically they just don't have to do anything. And then the simple majority would carry the continuing resolution to fund the government. Now they're trying to fund the government for about 6 months to try to get to the fall, to give the Trump administration time, partially the Doge with Elon Musk and others, to find savings in the government. A lot of waste that he's found already, but it really hasn't been enough to touch the $2 trillion that we have in shortfall in the budget right now. Now, this continuing resolution is basically just the same structure, the same budget that Joe Biden had. So any, argument that the left has to say that this is a dangerous bill or that they need to filibuster really is completely meaningless, because it's all the same stuff. They want to talk about Medicare. They want to talk about cuts to Medicaid, that things will be, needed. Essential services will be cut to the American people. It's just not true. It's all conjecture. It is just them trying to spread fear over things that haven't even been mentioned. I mean, we've said it before. We keep saying it. Donald Trump has stated numerous times he has no interest in reducing these benefits to people, which is kind of, I don't know how they're going to find the savings without touching those items, because they are the top items in the budget. I mean, between the military, social services, and interest on our loans, on our debt, those are the top 3 budget items in the federal government, which just seems crazy, but it is actually the case. So these millions and millions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse that Elon Musk and Doge are finding really are just the tip of the iceberg. So here's the rest of the clip of Chuck Schumer talking about the dangers. This is him in the past now, talking about the dangers of shutting down the government.
If the government shuts down, it will be average Americans who suffer most. A government shutdown means seniors who rely on Social Security could be thrown into chaos, as the Social Security Administration limits certain services like benefit verifications or fixing errors in payments. Our veterans could see regional VA offices shut down and support services put on halt. Some of our military service members could be forced to work without pay. Families who benefit from WIC and other nutrition programs could see benefits halted.
So he recognized the danger of it in the past, which is always interesting. The left always pretends like we can't pull up clips from them saying the opposite of what they're saying today at the touch of the click of a button, literally a few mouse clicks away. And it is easier than ever to find the hypocrisy that they said completely the opposite of what they're saying today 10 minutes ago. And this is a perfect example. And we have more examples of that coming up in a little bit. But now we have Cory Booker here, who is talking about, he's senator out of New Jersey, and he's talking about why they want to hold up this continuing resolution.
This is saying, let's just give up even more of our constitutional authority because, hey, he can do a lot worse later on. And so to me, that's capitulating to someone who's already showing that he's reckless and willing to do a lot of destruction. We are in a perverse, bizarro land where we're having to decide between letting Donald Trump wreck the government this way or wreck the government that way. So at what point do you say I'm going to stand and fight?
If you guys block this, it's going to be a shutdown, and you essentially could be playing with fire here.
Well, it'll be a Republican shutdown.
So, of course, Senator Jeff Merkley there at the end saying that it would be a Republican shutdown, which is kind of hard to push. I mean, it's always interesting to see how the American public takes something, because we, of course, know that the leftist lamestream media is always going to push and say that it's the Republicans' fault. But the American people have an all-time low trust in the mainstream, lamestream, I should say, media today. And the messaging that they say, even though they say it in unison, we've seen that in clip over and over again, is not sticking like it used to. They have a smaller and smaller viewership as these non-mainstream media sources like podcasters, like the Daily Wire, and many others, Newsmax. There's so many that are now able to, put these things out there in ways that the lamestream media doesn't. So they don't have the ability to just echo this soundtrack over and over again with whatever message they want to be the truth. So we also have another version of the Democratic Party. Now, John Fetterman, who seems like he's been more and more sensical ever since his stroke and in his recovery, seems like he's almost conservative at this point, just doesn't want to change the letter next to his name, which is fine because we need people on the other side of the aisle fighting for common sense as well. But he talks about the reason why you need to continue, sign this continuous resolution.
Is the Democrats are going to have the choice to vote for whether you want the cloture or the final one, and if you refuse to or you withhold your vote, you're voting about shutting the government down. And so that's always been my point. Now it's a CR that we all agree we don't like, and we don't co-sign on all of those elements. But for me, it's about we can't ever allow the government to shut down.
And so at least John Fetterman has a consistent message, right? If you believe that it's bad to shut the government down, you have to believe that it's bad to shut the government down, no matter who the president is. Okay? You can't just take this angle of, well, if it's somebody I like, I'm going to vote for it. If somebody I don't like, you're going to vote against it. That's not being consistent. That's not being honest. That's not doing what you think is best for the country. That's doing what you feel like doing today, which is not what you signed up for when you took the job of being a senator. Now, Senator Rand Paul out of Kentucky talks about, some of the other aspects of this continuing resolution, like I said before, where it's continuing the same level of spending that they decided on previous to Donald Trump taking office.
The bill we're going to have to face this week will be continuing spending at the same level. These are the levels that were determined in December between Democrats and Republicans. These are the Biden spending levels. We know one result that will come from these spending levels, a $2 trillion deficit. So these spending levels exceed revenue by $2 trillion. There's no escaping that. So there's nothing conservative about these spending levels. No fiscal conservative should support this because it's going to borrow $2 trillion. That was the principle which once upon a time united all fiscal conservatives. So I will oppose it. I will propose an amendment today, and I'm hoping to get a vote on it. This amendment will take some of the Doge and Elon Musk cuts to foreign aid and incorporate them into the spending.
So he says at the end that he's going to oppose this bill. I actually don't believe that he will vote against it. He may not like it. He may, propose some changes. But in the end, I do believe that the Republicans will hold together in the Senate. They lost one vote in the House only because, you're same person who always votes against it. But I believe that in the Senate, they're all pretty unified around this. And like I said, as long as the Democrats don't filibuster, it will just go through with a simple majority. Now, you keep hearing this same repeated claim of reduction in Medicaid, taking people's health care away from them, all this kind of stuff. And besides the fact that the people on the right, the conservatives, even especially Donald Trump, has not even mentioned touching Medicaid. He has mentioned that he doesn't want to touch it. He doesn't want to affect services at the VA, all these things that the left keeps, trying to claim and fearmonger about have never even been pushed. But it's kind of interesting because, first of all, it probably needs to happen knowing that those are such big line items in the budget. But there is also an inconsistency here. And here's a clip, a montage of a few different congressmen and women who in the past, these are all Democrats, have talked about the need to
We simply must make the cuts in waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare. We owe it to our country.
There is an enormous amount of waste and fraud and abuse in this government. When there is waste and fraud, you have an administration who should also be on top of that situation.
If we're going to eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare, it does mean we're going to cut some of that out. We want to cut the bad stuff and keep the good stuff.
So I do find that interesting that they have changed their tone once again, as we know that the left loves to do. They love to be inconsistent. They know that they're not going to be held accountable by the media. And that is another reason why the dismantling of the lamestream media needs to happen. It has already started, but it needs to happen at a much more rapid pace. Independent media sources, podcasters, and the like need to grow. People need to pay attention more to that kind of content and less to the lamestream media, because they are a complete and utter failure and tool of the Democratic Party. Now, speaking of the economy and some of the other things affecting it, there's tariffs continuing. The tariff battle continues. There has been a country in Europe that has threatened to put 200% tariffs on whiskey. European Union is trying to get together and put tariffs on specific items that would affect mainly red states. So they are targeting politically, areas that especially supported Donald Trump. Donald Trump has threatened to do the same and put a similar or higher tariff on things that the European countries export, such as wine and champagne and stuff like that. So it's kind of a back and forth. It's interesting to see, how this battle plays out. I think ultimately Donald Trump knows that the U.S. economy is much stronger than any of these other countries, and that ultimately we can use that leverage to win, but it is yet to be seen what the ultimate final bill will be and what he actually negotiates out of it. Is it going to be financial? Is it going to be something else? We will see. But here is a little animation somebody put together explaining a little bit about tariffs between at least Mexico, the United States, and Canada, and why the United States has leverage, at least in that territory.
The most insane trade war has officially begun because Canada, Mexico, and China are pissed and have now all announced their own plans on how to retaliate against Trump's tariffs. So what the hell is going on? Well, you see, yesterday Trump's promised 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and 10% on China officially kicked in. What that means is that any goods sent from these countries to the United States will now cost companies 25% more, or 10% in China's case. So for example, if a Canadian business sent a car to the U.S. that cost $50,000, today U.S. companies will pay a $12,500 tariff at the border. So the price of your once $50,000 car is now actually $62,500. Why would Trump purposefully make things more expensive for Americans? Well, two main reasons. The first is more of a longer-term, unguaranteed benefit, but it would be to change consumer habits to buy more American-made products and incentivize more international companies to manufacture in the U.S. In theory, that means a stronger U.S. economy, more stable jobs, and less dependence on foreign countries. The second reason for imposing these tariffs would be to use them as a tool to pressure Canada, Mexico, and China into doing what Trump wants. Some of these things that he's publicly mentioned include renegotiating trade deals, stopping illegal immigration, and the flow of fentanyl. There's also the far-fetched idea of Canada becoming a state of America. But here's where things get interesting. Because instead of just doing what Trump wants, Canada has clapped back with a 25% tariff of their own, and Mexico said they're doing the same but haven't announced the percentage yet. China reacted a little differently by preparing to file a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization. So why is Trump not backing down? Just listen to this. In 2023, Canada sent 76% of all of their exports to the United States. That accounts for roughly 19% of their entire GDP. In 2024, Mexico sent 78% of all of their exports to the United States. That makes up 37% of their entire GDP. But for America, their exports to both countries combined only make up roughly 2.7% of their entire GDP. So simply put, even if they do retaliate, getting into a tariff war with the United States would hit Canada and Mexico much harder. Trump knows this, and he's using it.
So that's kind of a useful little put together of how the United States can leverage some of that fiscal strength in order to, win in the end with this tariff war. And it's kind of funny that, Mexico, China, or Canada, even China, European Union now is trying to pretend like they can win in the end. I think they're basically struggling out in the middle of the ocean with somebody who can't swim, basically trying to keep their head above water, all the meanwhile saying, I'm not drowning in the ocean. You can't make me drown in the ocean, but I'm surrounded by miles and miles of water and I don't know how to swim. So it is going to be futile, but it's kind of interesting because Donald Trump's been all over the place about what his mission is. The video kind of claimed that the mission was to bring business and, work back to the United States. That is definitely an angle that could be working. I mean, he's already kind of brought to the light a couple different companies who have made agreements to bring companies back to the United States and manufacturing back to the United States. So if that's his mission, maybe more will come, and it will be interesting to see how that works. Now, we have another economist, Kevin Hassett, who's on the Council for American Economics, the National Economic Council of the United States. He's the director. He's been for quite some time, and explaining how the tariffs could help the United States economy.
Follow up only on when we talk about, you were saying to John about how we're getting revenue from the tariffs. Can you help Americans better understand how that works, that we're getting revenue from tariffs? Because the way it's often explained to us is, well, the consumers ultimately pay that. It's the companies that are taking in these goods that have to pay that money. So it's not going to Treasury. How are Americans seeing revenue from tariffs?
Sure. Let's think through the economics of it. So let's look at China. What happens is if you put a tax on something and it's inelastically supplied, then the person who supplies it is the one who pays the tax. And so if you have an apple tree and it's got 100 apples and you got to go to market and you got to sell your 100 apples, then you're going to sell the 100 apples no matter what. You're not going to adjust anything. And so the most inelastic thing in the global economy is Chinese supply. So if you put a tariff on Chinese supply, then the Chinese are going to bear it. The only way they wouldn't bear it is that they moved capital out of the country, but they can't move capital out of the country. They have capital controls. So the most inelastic thing in the world is Chinese supply. If we put a tariff on China, the Chinese pay it, not U.S. consumers. And by the way, how do they produce the stuff? They produce the stuff with electricity that's fired with coal. So in some sense, it's like a carbon tax as well. And so everybody who talks about the tariff hitting consumers just hasn't done basic Econ 101.
But I guess so to the Americans, because we've been seeing interviews, at least just flipping channels on TV, where there are businesses around America saying we have to raise our prices because things are coming to us. They're passing on those prices to consumers. So are they mistaken? What are we missing there?
Well,
why are Americans paying more?
Oh, well, President Biden just wasted, last year $2 trillion on excess deficit spending, and we haven't passed the reconciliation bill that cuts spending yet. And so, of course, the memory of the Biden policies, which are still in place, is going to be visible in the inflation data until we get the policy change.
So to be clear, when they say it's because of the new tariffs, that's why they're raising the prices, that I just get confused because they keep telling us what are we missing?
Well, I don't know who you're talking to, but the point is that do you dispute that having runaway deficit spending impacts inflation, and that those inflation impacts are large? I don't think you would dispute that.
Wait, but you just said that China would pay these tariffs, but it's American businesses importing goods that remit the money to the government, right?
No, it's Chinese production that bears the tax. It's simple. Yes, they do. It's simple tax incidence.
Money over to the U.S. is what I'm saying. They aren't directly
in the end, let's go through a simple example. That I used to mow lawns, and I'd get money, and I'd go buy candy bars at the grocery store. And let's say it was a quarter, but let's use $1. Sure. So if I put $1 down to buy a candy bar, and then all of a sudden Massachusetts says 10-cent tax, that if I go and buy my candy bar, if it costs $1.10, then I paid the 10 cents. If the candy bar is $1, then the store gets 90 cents and they paid the 10 cents tax. And so tax incidences, like what happens to the price when Kevin buys the candy bar? Is it less than $1? Is it more than $1? And what I'm saying is that the store paying 90 cents and paying 10 cents tax, that circumstance is something that economists well understand, and it matches exactly the characteristics of the Chinese economy. So the Chinese are going to pay that tax.
So what I think he's trying to say is, in the end, not only will China, bear some of this responsibility, but the reason why China will bear some of the responsibility is because they're in the United States market, where they have competition with other companies in the United States. They have to, stay in competition with. So what'll happen is, if China decides to pass along the tariff to the consumer, or even to the middleman that reaches the consumer, what'll happen is that middleman or the consumer will choose an American product instead of the Chinese product because it will be cheaper. And that is ultimately the point of the tariff, is to keep the business with your, local businesses instead of going overseas to benefit companies in other countries. And so that's what he's trying to explain there. Now, I don't want to beat the dead horse too much, but there is one other interview that I thought was interesting. Mike Rowe was talking about this as well. Here's a clip of that.
Reciprocal tariffs that he's proposing, are you worried that they're going to hurt certain industries in the U.S.?
Long term or short term?
Short term.
Yes, they will hurt short term. Is it worth it long term? Look, do you want to be dependent on China? Do you want to be reliant on other countries? These are really simple, fundamental questions. And if the answer is we want to be more independent, then there's going to be some short-term pain. I don't know how else to even think about that. So yeah, I worry about it. But in the end, how do you not? I think it'll be worth it to be less reliant on countries who hate us. I think it'll be worth it to be less dependent on countries that aren't terribly concerned with what's best for us. I am all for an equal playing field, and I'm all for every kind of independence we can muster, whether it's energy independence, economic independence, workforce independence, all of it.
And so I thought that was interesting, because Mike Rowe made some points there that really I haven't heard too much in the media or anybody else talking about, is the fact that this furthers American independence. Now, the problem with that is that we can't be completely independent. Actually, Ben Shapiro pointed this out, that if you try to completely close yourself off and not, involve yourself with the outside world at all, not do any kind of trade, and just try to do everything within your own country, it has never succeeded in the world. Now, that's not really to saying that the United States couldn't do it, but there is definitely more interest in doing business with other countries than just getting cheaper goods and getting services at lower prices or better products or anything like that. More competition. There's other reasons. It just involving yourself with other world entities helps to, share. I mean, here's a good example. When Donald Trump came into office, we started to see the policies of other countries change drastically, right? And so we can use our moral structure and moral guidance, because the United States, being a Judeo-Christian created country, has a solid basis of morality. And other countries don't all have that. In fact, most do not. And they have shown that because they have made wild swings in different moral structures throughout the ages, where the United States has gradually progressed into leftism, but not had wild swings back and forth, and not as far as some of the other countries have. So we can share some of that as well. Also, we get some insight into what's happening in other countries, and we get better knowledge of if there's a risk to our country from the outside by staying involved in those other countries as well. So there's definitely more benefit than just financial and business aspects of it. But, there is a certain, benefit to being independent. I mean, especially when it comes to security concerns. We've seen the danger in having all chips manufactured outside the United States, in having like spyware installed in some of these chips coming from China and things like that. It can be quite dangerous. So it's interesting on that point. So in the Ukraine-Russia war, there's been some developments. Ukraine has agreed to a peace deal and a path forward for this war to end. Now, there's been some signals from Putin in both directions. I think that he's probably spoken with Donald Trump to some extent, and Donald Trump knows what he's looking for. But here's a little clip of what Putin has said about the war. He's looking for more long-lasting peace, but his list of demands are not really realistic. But of course, when we negotiate, we always come in with a little bit more expectation or bring more requests to the table than we actually expect to get. And I think that's probably what he is doing here.
As for readiness of Ukraine for the ceasefire, I'll tell you my estimation of this. But first of all, I would like to thank the President of the United States for paying so much attention to regulating the conflict in Ukraine. Of course, we all have lots of current issues to deal with, and the chairman of China and the Prime Minister of India, heads of states of Brazil and South Africa, they are dealing with this issue, and they're paying a lot of attention to this, and we're grateful for this. And we're hoping that we understand that their activity is aimed at reducing loss of human life in the conflict. Secondly, we agree with the proposals for the ceasefire, but our position is based on the assumption that the ceasefire would lead to a long-term peace, something that would remove the initial reasons for the crisis. As for the readiness of Ukraine to ceasefire, there's a meeting between Americans and Ukrainians in Saudi Arabia, and it looks like a decision that is taken by Ukrainian side under American pressure. In reality, I am completely convinced that Ukraine had to ask Americans insist on this based on the situation on the ground.
So we kind of have some insight there into what Putin is looking for, and it'll be interesting to see what he is willing to negotiate on. Now, Donald Trump also met in the Oval Office with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and talked about some aspects of the Ukraine war and ending, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine as well. Here's him talking about that.
We're going to be discussing a lot of things. Obviously, we'll be discussing what's happening with respect to Ukraine and Russia. At this moment, we have people talking in Russia. We have representatives over there, Steve Witkoff and others, and they're in very serious discussions. As you know, Ukraine has agreed, subject to this, what's happening today, to a complete ceasefire, and we hope Russia will do the same. Thousands of people are being killed, young people, usually, mostly young people. We were just talking about it. Thousands of young people are being killed a week, and we want to see that stop. And they're not Americans, and they're not from the Netherlands for the most part. No. They're from Russia, and they're from Ukraine, but they're people. And I think everybody feels the same way. We want it to stop. It's also a tremendous cost to the United States and to other countries. And it's something that would have never happened if I were president, and it makes me very angry to see that it did happen. But it happened, and we have to stop it. And Mark has done some really good work over the last week. We've been working together, and he's done some really good work, so I'm very happy about that. We'll also be talking about trade and various other things, and I think we'll have a very, very strong day. We're going to have lunch afterwards. That'll go, and then we'll see you all later.
So this is obviously a priority for the president. He points out that this conflict started under Biden only because Biden was president, and if he would have been president at the time, this conflict would have never started. This is actually something he's brought up numerous times, and I do believe that it is true, and the evidence speaks for itself. When he was president already, that was the only period in the last decade plus that Putin did not take any extra territory outside of Russia. So I think he does have some credit to him there, just based on, the past. So CNN came out with another report. This was a poll done by SSRS, out of Pennsylvania. They were hired by CNN to do a poll of President Trump. This was done between March 6th and 9th of this year. And it goes through some general approval ratings of Donald Trump. So they're saying just general approval levels, he's approved by 45%. Americans disapproved by 54%, with a 1% no opinion. This is down from February when it was at 48%, and earlier in February was at 47%. But at the end of his presidency, he was at the low 30s, low 40s, that kind of level. So it's high compared to that standard. It's definitely high compared to Joe Biden's numbers. And in certain areas where you break it down, he's got better ratings than others. So when you're talking about approving the way he's handling his job, you're talking about a 45% approval rating. When you're talking about handling the economy, it's a little lower, 44%, with a 56% disapproving. When you're talking about healthcare policy, 43% approval rating, which I think is most people don't even think the federal government is in charge of their healthcare. So that probably is not really something many people even think about. On immigration, he's got a 51% approval rating, which is no surprise there. Foreign affairs, 42%. So these tariff wars, Ukraine, Russia conflict, ending some of that could help those numbers for sure. Handling the federal budget is approved at 48%. Immigration, we already talked about, so there's a different part there. Having the right priorities, he's got a 43% approval rating. So some people are saying that he hasn't paid enough attention to the country's most important problems, which is probably the economy. So helping on that front would be helpful. However, when you compare it to Joe Biden in May of 2023, so this was before a lot of the inflation took hold, there were only 31% of Americans who thought that Joe Biden had the right priorities. Okay, a 69% disapproval, thinking he hadn't paid enough attention to the problems of America. So it's actually a pretty high number, and even goes back to Obama thinking that he had the right priorities. When he was closing out his presidency, he only had a 42% rate of having the right priorities. So Donald Trump's even beating Obama towards the end of his term. It's funny to see that Obama in 2009 had a 63% approval rating. So people took a little while to realize that he was pulling the wool over their eyes there. So some interesting numbers that'll be good to continue watching in the future. And hopefully it will keep on the positive side, and some of them will get better, I think, as Trump brings some of his plans to fruition. So we'll have to keep an eye on those. Now, another interesting story is Buttigieg. You remember Pete Buttigieg? He was a transportation secretary under Joe Biden because he liked trains, and he took his 2-month hiatus for his spouse, which is a man, adopting a baby. So I'm not really sure what that leave was needed for, but nobody really noticed he was gone anyways. But he is talking about not running for Senate because he is eyeing a presidential run in 2028, which should be interesting. Remember how we talked about their short bench and they don't know who's leading their party? This is why. Here's a clip of him under the Biden administration doing a little talk, And it's not really relevant what he's talking about. The relevancy is why he would be such a terrible presidential candidate and why he bowed out early in the last race.
If an underpass was constructed such that a bus carrying mostly black and Puerto Rican kids to a beach, or there would have been, in New York was designed too low for it to pass by, that obviously reflects racism that went into those design choices. I don't think we have anything to lose by confronting that simple reality, and I think we have everything to gain by acknowledging it and then dealing with it, which is why the Reconnecting Communities, that $1 billion, is something we want to get to work right away.
So it'll be interesting to see how far he gets into this presidential run, because I don't think there are a lot of people taking him too seriously. He really doesn't have the qualifications. He hasn't done anything spectacular, and I don't think that he's going to be a front runner. I mean, he really just doesn't have that it factor that's going to draw people to him to vote. I have heard some lefties excited that he's running or talking about it already. Maybe just because Kamala set the bar so low, they'll take anybody at this point. But I don't think that it's going to really happen. Here is a political commentator, Mark Halperin, explaining the qualifications for Pete Buttigieg are basically that he's short and gay, and that it's not going to be enough.
Got to say it. He's short and gay. Yeah. So you can say winning the nomination, being short and gay is a positive. And for some people, maybe not short, but gay is a positive. And I know for some people there is. But there is going to be a premium for the party in 2028 on winning, right? It's just like 92. There are going to be a lot of voters who are willing to swallow stuff in order to win. They'll say, I don't like this fact, if this person can win. I've looked at the list of people who've won the presidency. None of them were openly gay. 3 were gay, but none were openly gay. And so it's just a risk. And in almost every presidential race, not everyone, but in almost every presidential race in the television era, the taller person is won. The Republican nominee in 2028 will be taller than Pete Buttigieg. So
I definitely would push back on a lot of things he said there, because I think they're pretty much non sequiturs. But, he's just trying to say that it's a risk that he's gay and short. Not only that those are his only qualifications, or that there's only features that would make him presidential, which, or I don't know how that makes him presidential even, but that's the most, like standout features that he has, and that he's saying it's a risk and there really is no reward to picking him. That I would agree with. But the fact that he's just short and gay, I don't think being short automatically, I mean, there is some subconscious human nature to saying that guy's short and that guy's tall. I trust the tall guy to be stronger and a better leader than the short guy. There may be some subconscious to that. But I don't ultimately think those are going to be the things that end him. And I don't think those are the things that ended him in the past. I think it's just that he doesn't have that it factor. He doesn't have anything that draws anybody to him. And he doesn't have the qualifications that would meet the candidacy of the president of the United States. Now we've got to get to some leftist lunacy. We've got a couple clips today, just kind of fun to watch, I suppose. And the first one is one of our favorites, Maxine Waters. And she's talking about the fact that she believes Donald Trump is going to start a civil war.
I'm worried that Trump is on the edge of creating a civil war. He alluded to it more than once. He alluded to the fact that if he did not get reelected, that there could be a civil war. What does Trump expect? Oh, I believe he expects violence. I believe he expects confrontation. I believe he's working toward a civil war. We're not going to get goaded.
Hey, Maxine, remember that time when you told people to go out and get in Trump supporters' faces and get loud and push up on them and push back on them? Remember when you said that? Oh, who's the one who was going to start a civil war? Who's the one trying to start violence? Answer that. I know you're old and probably don't remember saying that, but you could just search it online like we all do and see it. Crazy. Anyways, in another crazy episode, we got Representative McBride, who is a man who has long hair and claims to be a woman, and is bringing up the fact, although the voice is still kind of deep, it's super, super weird, but talking about the fact that the Republican Party is obsessed with culture, and also is weird. And it is kind of, like I said, it's just what is going on?
We will not take a lecture on decorum from a party that incited an insurrection. I appear to live rent-free in the minds of some of my Republican colleagues. I wish that they would spend even a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, thinking about how to lower the costs for American families. I wish they would spend a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, figuring out how to make government actually work better, rather than making it work worse in order to prove that government can't work. They are obsessed with culture war issues. The Republican Party is obsessed with culture war issues. It is weird and it is bizarre. And the American people deserve serious legislators, serious elected officials who are focused on bringing people together to deliver real results for the American people, not to play games and not to engage in schoolyard taunts.
Remember, you deserve serious legislature. You deserve serious congresspeople. You deserve people who aren't playing games like dress up like they're a woman. You deserve people who want your best interest in mind. And it's the Republican Party trying to ruin the government and ruin America. It's a Republican Party who is not looking out for the best interest in America. Remember that, okay? It's them who are weird, not the people playing dress up and pretending they're a different gender and wanting to be called different things than they are. It's not them that are weird. It's you. Remember that. So that's the leftist craziness for today. Well, that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks for joining for another episode today. Don't forget to check back tomorrow, where I'm sure we'll find some more crazy things going on in the country. And I just want to say thank you for joining. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment below, share it with a friend. And don't forget to go out and volunteer for something meaningful. And as always, go out and spark the conversation.